Hey, Wells. Why do you always wear that old, torn jacket? Lucas sneered, his voice slicing through the hallway air like a jagged blade, sharp enough to sting. The other students froze, their heads swiveling, eyes wide with curiosity and a flicker of pity. Your dad was just a nobody. Brady piled on, his smirk twisting into something cruel, his words dripping with venom. What did he ever do worth a damn, huh? The laughter that followed was icy, heartless. Lucas, Brady, and Chase grabbing at the jacket, yanking at the faded fabric, clawing at it like they could tear away every piece of Ethan's soul. Can you imagine that? 3 against 1, trying to rip apart everything he held dear. Later, they were dragged to the principal's office, forced to face the mess they'd made. Ethan sat there, his gaze locked on the scuffed floor, silent but unyielding, a rock in a storm. They demanded an apology, can you believe it, but he wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Why should he? He hadn't done a thing wrong. Then, out of nowhere, the low growl of engines rumbled outside as 2 sleek black SUVs screeched to a halt. A colonel stepped out, tall and steady, his uniform crisp as a winter morning, his gaze sweeping the room like a quiet thunderclap. The air went still, heavy with something bigger than words. Because sometimes, honor isn't about medals or loud speeches, it's about the quiet strength that refuses to break. Welcome to Heartfelt Gratitude Stories, where we dig deep into tales of compassion, kindness, and the kind of courage that doesn't need a spotlight. So, let's peel back the layers and uncover what really happened, shall we? Ethan Wells wasn't just any kid, he was 15, a boy with shoulders still too narrow for the weight of his father's faded green military jacket. But oh, how he wore it. Like it was a badge of honor, a piece of his heart stitched into every thread. That jacket swallowed him whole, too big for his lanky frame, but it was his, more precious than anything those shallow kids at Maplewood High School could ever grasp. My name's Nora West, and I've been a history teacher at Maplewood for over 10 years. I've seen a lot, fights, tears, the usual teenage chaos, but what happened to Ethan? That was different. It cut deep, personal in a way I couldn't shake. I stood there, day after day, watching that jacket set him apart like a beacon, drawing every mocking stare in those crowded hallways. It was early October, the kind of cold that sneaks into your bones, with crisp northern winds whispering promises of a brutal winter. Maplewood was already bundled up, scarves, thick sweaters, the works, but not Ethan. He never swapped that jacket for anything warmer. Why would he? It still carried the faint, fleeting scent of his father's aftershave, a fragile tether to Matthew Wells, the man who'd held him tight, who'd whispered tales of grit and sacrifice, who'd served in shadows and left this world without a single medal to show for it. In a town obsessed with shiny trophies and big names, that worn-out jacket was Ethan's proof that real worth isn't something you can pin on a chest. Maplewood High was your typical small-town school, a squat brick relic from decades past, with a gym that reeked of stale sweat and echoes of forgotten games. The hallways were a gallery of faded photos and championship banners, a shrine to a tradition nobody seemed to truly understand anymore. Ethan didn't belong in that picture. His dad's name wasn't etched on any of those trophies lining the main hall. He didn't have the cash for travel teams or the pedigree for the fancy dances. Just a quiet kid in an old jacket, slipping through the crowds like a ghost. And maybe that's what got under Lucas's skin most of all, Ethan had something they couldn't touch. Lucas Carter, Brady Wilkes, and Chase Freeman, those boys were Maplewood royalty, sons of the men who owned half the town. They strutted those halls like kings, chests puffed out, owning every inch. Brady with his cocky grin and pricey sneakers that squeaked on the linoleum. Chase tagging along, always a step behind, his laugh a hollow echo. But Lucas? He was the ringleader, perfect hair, perfect teeth, and a smile that could cut glass. He looked at Ethan's jacket and saw something he couldn't buy, something he couldn't stand. Hey, Wells. Lucas called out that morning, leaning against the lockers like he owned them, arms crossed, that lazy grin curling his lips. I was watching from my classroom doorway, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Still playing soldier with that rag, huh? Thought you'd have grown out of dress-up by now. What are you, 5? Brady and Chase cackled, their voices bouncing off the walls, but Ethan didn't even flinch. He just kept his head down, one hand resting on the patch at his shoulder, his dad's old unit insignia, worn but proud. Those words hit me like a slap, sharp and stinging, but I didn't move. Not yet. I'd learned some battles need time to unfold, and Ethan. He never asked for help. Never said a word. That silence, it was his shield, his strength, but God, what a heavy burden for a kid to carry. In my classroom, he'd sit in the back row by the window, that jacket pulled tight around him like armor. His eyes would drift past the whiteboard, past my lectures, lost in some far-off place I couldn't reach. Sometimes, I'd catch him pulling an old photo from his wallet, a snapshot of Matthew Wells standing in a dusty field, boots laced tight, one hand resting on his rifle. No medals, just a tired smile, the kind that carried the weight of a man who knew exactly why he was there, who lived duty and honor in every breath. Ethan would trace that photo's edge with his thumb, like he was afraid it'd vanish if he let go. What did he see in it? A hero? A ghost? Or just the dad who'd hoisted him onto broad shoulders, who taught him to stand tall even when the world tried to knock him flat? Outside, the wind rattled the leaves, brittle and restless. Inside, the halls hushed as the first bell rang. I watched Ethan pack his books, shoulders hunched like he was waiting for a punch that never landed, but it did, every single day. Lucas made damn sure of that. "Tell me, Wells," he said later in the cafeteria, leaning across the table, his voice smooth as honey but sharp as a blade. "Did your dad ever actually do anything? Or was he just another nobody who couldn't hack it?" I was by the lunch line, clipboard clutched tight, but my heart stopped dead. Ethan froze, fingers digging into that jacket, knuckles white as bone. But he didn't speak, not a word. He just stood, tray in hand, and walked away, head high. Lucas laughed, Brady and Chase slapping hands like they'd scored a touchdown. And me? I couldn't move. I should have shouted, should have told them medals don't make a man, that some heroes serve in ways no ribbon can measure. But I didn't. I stood there, rooted, because right then I saw it, Ethan's silence wasn't weakness. It was his tribute, his way of keeping his dad's lessons alive, to stand firm, even when no one stood with him. After school, I watched him leave alone, that jacket flapping in the biting wind. He didn't look back, never did. But I couldn't tear my eyes away, not until he vanished behind the old oak at the soccer field's edge. And I swore to myself, if he could carry that jacket every day, I could carry this story. Because some legacies don't live in books, they're woven into the seams of a boy's jacket, worn by a kid who refuses to let go. The next day, the tension was suffocating, thick enough to choke on. Classes dragged by, math, history, science, the hum of lights and scratch of pencils a dull backdrop to the storm brewing underneath. Something was coming, you could feel it crackling in the air. When the final bell rang, I watched Ethan leave my room, shoulders squared, jacket snug against the cold. I wanted to yell, "Be careful," but he was gone, lost in the flood of kids rushing out. My hands shook as I gathered my papers. Lucas and his crew wouldn't let this rest. They never did. Stepping outside, the wind bit through my coat, and there they were, Lucas, Brady, and Chase, lurking by the soccer field. The grass was slick with frost, a muddy mess of dead leaves under a gray sky that mirrored the heaviness of the moment. Ethan walked right into it, head down, hand in his pocket. Did he even see them? Too late, he was trapped. "Hey, Wells." Lucas's voice slithered out, low and slick. Ethan stopped, breath clouding in the chill. Lucas stepped closer, that grin stretching wide. "Why don't you take off that jacket? Let the world see you for what you are, a nobody, just like your dad." Brady barked a laugh, Chase's eyes glinting with malice. Ethan shook his head once. No, he said, the word dropping like a stone, solid and sure. Lucas's smile faltered. Brady grabbed the sleeve, snarling, "It's just a jacket, what's so special about it?" Ethan yanked away, gripping it tight. "It's mine," he said, voice steady as steel. Lucas's eyes darkened. "Your dad's a nobody, Wells. No medals, no glory, just a ghost in a uniform." I watched, heart pounding, from too far away. I should have run over, should have screamed, but I didn't, not yet. Brady shoved Ethan, hard, sending him stumbling, feet sliding in the mud. He didn't let go of that jacket, clinging to it like it was his lifeline. Lucas grabbed the collar, trying to rip it free. Ethan pushed back, fierce but outmatched. The three of them swarmed him, shoving him down. He hit the ground with a sickening thud, breath knocked out of him, the silence deafening. Brady loomed over him, face twisted. "Say it, Wells. Say you're nothing. Say your dad was nothing." But Ethan didn't budge, didn't blink, his eyes burned with a truth I could feel from yards away. He'd never say it. Never. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned, legs moving before my mind caught up, racing to the basement file room. It was cold, musty, reeking of old paper and lost time, the flickering bulb casting shadows that danced like ghosts. I tore through the mess, report cards, clippings, junk, until I found it, Matthew Wells's file, buried between faded yearbooks. My hands shook as I opened it, a single yellowed page, typed words blazing, "Sergeant Matthew Wells, commended for bravery, undisclosed mission." No medals, no fanfare, but proof of a hero nobody knew. A fire roared in my chest. Ethan had to know. The world had to know. I called Robert Miller, an old college friend who'd served, who'd come back quiet like Matthew. "Nora," he answered, calm and warm. "Robert, I need you." I spilled it all, the jacket, the bullies, Ethan's unbreakable silence. "Send me the file," he said, firm. "I'll be there by morning." I hung up, clutching that page, as the final bell shrieked upstairs. For Ethan, this wasn't over, it was just beginning. Next morning, the school buzzed, whispers flying like sparks. Ethan, Lucas, Brady, and Chase were summoned to the principal's office. Those boys swaggered in, smug as ever, but a knot twisted in my gut. Justice wasn't guaranteed here, not with their families' pull. Then the SUVs rolled up, and Robert stepped out, a colonel now, his presence silencing everything. And I knew, the truth was coming, and Ethan's quiet strength would finally shine. Ethan sat across from Principal Harris, his father's jacket clutched so tightly around him that his small hands trembled. Can you imagine the sting of those words hurled at him? Apologize. Disruptive. Unacceptable behavior. And yet, there was Ethan, silent as a winter night, but oh, what fierce power radiated from that silence. I could see it in the stubborn set of his jaw, the unyielding fire in his steady eyes. Even as Harris's voice boomed louder, sharper, Ethan stood his ground. Not this time. Not for them. I lingered outside that suffocating office, my fists clenched so hard my knuckles ached. Why is it that the hardest thing sometimes is to just stand still when every nerve in your body is screaming to charge in? My heart pounded as I forced myself to wait, clinging to the promise I'd made to Robert Miller. He was coming, I knew it. And deep down, I felt the certainty that he wouldn't let Ethan face this storm alone. Not anymore. Then, bam, the door to the principal's office flew open, and a heavy hush swallowed the room whole. Every head whipped around, breaths caught mid-sentence, eyes wide with shock. Outside, there they were, two sleek black SUVs humming at the curb, their engines rumbling low like a heartbeat in the distance. Who could it be? From the first stepped a man I knew instantly, even before his voice broke the silence. Robert Miller strode in, his army dress blues crisp and proud, medals glinting like tiny beacons against the dark wool. Beside him towered another officer, older, taller, his very presence demanding respect without a single word. They crossed the threshold with a quiet gravity. Can you hear it? The soft click-click of their polished shoes on the tile pulsing like a lifeline through the stillness. Ethan glanced up from his seat, that worn jacket gripped tight in his hands. For a fleeting second, he didn't breathe, neither did I. Principal Harris stumbled to his feet, his words tripping over themselves, his mouth flapping like a stranded fish. Lucas and his cronies. Their faces drained of color, their cocky grins crumbling fast under the weight of those uniforms. But Robert? He didn't even glance their way. No, he marched right to Ethan and rested a steady, comforting hand on his shoulder. And when he spoke, his voice flowed low and warm, like a balm to a wound. You don't have to sign anything today, he declared. Son, he added, and oh, how that word landed. Ethan's eyes widened, tears shimmering there, teetering on the edge but not yet spilling over. This jacket, Robert went on, his voice swelling just enough to fill every corner of the room, it isn't some dusty relic or a silly costume, it's a legacy, Ethan. A living, breathing legacy. He turned to Principal Harris, his face calm but carved from steel. Sergeant Matthew Wells was a soldier who gave more than most could ever dream of understanding. Robert said, each word deliberate, heavy with the echoes of a buried past. He saved lives, lives like mine, and he did it without chasing medals or begging for applause. That's the kind of man he was. A thick silence gripped the room, tight as a fist. I felt my breath snag in my chest, didn't you, as the truth of his words seeped into every crack and shadow. Then, with a gentle grace, Robert reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a fragile, yellowed piece of paper, preserved like a treasure. He offered it to Ethan, who took it with fingers that quaked. It's a letter your father wrote. Robert said softly. He wrote it for you, Ethan, when you were just a baby, in case he never made it home. Ethan unfolded it slowly, reverently, his lips trembling as he read in silence. I couldn't see the words, but oh, I saw their magic. His shoulders lifted, his breath escaped in a shaky gasp, like a prayer finally answered after years of waiting. And right then, I knew, no forced apology could ever hold a candle to this. Principal Harris coughed, his voice a feeble squeak now. Colonel Miller, he started, but Robert's sharp gaze sliced through him like a blade. This boy will not be forced to apologize for honoring his father, he vowed, each syllable ringing with quiet, unshakable promise. Lucas squirmed in his chair, that smug smirk of his blown away like dust in a storm. Brady and Chase. They couldn't even look up, their eyes glued to the floor in shame. Robert turned back to Ethan, his stern face melting into something tender. Your father was a man of quiet courage, he said warmly. He didn't want medals or parades or big speeches. But he wanted you to know this, Ethan, he was proud to wear that jacket. And you should be too. That's when Ethan's tears broke free, silent rivers streaking down his cheeks. He didn't brush them away, why would he? He didn't hide them. And in that raw moment, I saw his father's strength blazing alive in him. He clutched that jacket like it was his very soul, his fingers pressing into the faded fabric as if shouting, I'll never let this go. A shiver raced through me, and a tear slipped down my own cheek before I could catch it. Because Ethan wasn't just fighting for himself, oh no. He was standing tall for every unsung act of bravery that never got its due. Robert laid a hand on his shoulder again, firm and true. Your father may not have had a medal, he murmured, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper, but he had something greater, the respect of every soul who stood beside him. Ethan nodded, his chin high, tears still flowing freely. I know, he whispered, his voice soft but steady. I know. And in those two small words, there was a power no paper or pen could ever erase. Principal Harris shifted behind his desk, looking small and awkward now, dwarfed by the towering truth before him. I believe this meeting is over. Robert announced, turning to him with a calm finality that brooked no argument. Harris swallowed hard and gave a jerky nod. Ethan stood, the letter pressed tight to his chest, that jacket wrapping him like armor. He didn't glance at Lucas or his friends as he strode out, why should he? They were already shrinking into nothing. I followed them into the hallway, my heart thumping wildly, each step felt like a leap into light. Outside, the air bit cold, the sun a pale glow behind winter clouds. But Ethan? He didn't flinch. He held his head high, shoulders back, the jacket settling around him like a victorious flag. And in that moment, his father's memory wasn't a weight anymore, it was a crown, a blazing testament to a man who gave it all. I watched, awestruck, as Robert and the other officer walked beside him, their steps perfectly matched, a silent honor guard for this boy who carried more than a name. In the faint winter light, Ethan tilted his face to the sky, and I saw it, pride. Not the loud, showy kind, but the deep, quiet kind that pulses between breaths, in the heartbeat of a memory that'll never fade. I sucked in a shaky breath and let it out slow, knowing right then that Ethan Wells would never have to apologize again, not for the hero his father was, nor the brave boy he'd become. Not while someone remembered. Not while someone stood with him. Not while the truth of what matters most lived in the steady rhythm of that letter and the unbreakable bond of a jacket worn with honor. Ethan stepped out of that office, the burden of that forced apology falling away like dead leaves. Robert and the other officer stood by him, steady as oaks, their presence a shield against any lingering jabs. I joined them, every step ringing with purpose. Principal Harris stayed back, his eyes dodging Ethan's. Could he even face him now? The silence in that room was heavy, but it was a silence of something shattered and rebuilt, not lost. Lucas and his buddies slumped in their seats, their snickers silenced, their gazes locked on the scratched floor. For once, they saw Ethan as more than a punching bag, something they couldn't touch. Ethan didn't bother looking their way, no need. The hallway stretched empty before us, our footsteps bouncing off the walls. Morning sun streamed through high windows, painting golden stripes across the worn linoleum. That jacket caught the light, its frayed edges glowing like a quiet halo. I saw him lift his chin, just a touch, and my heart swelled. This boy would never be small again. We stepped outside, the cold nipping at our faces, but Ethan didn't care. The jacket fluttered at his sides like a proud little banner. Robert's hand found his shoulder again, his voice low but mighty. "You're not alone, Ethan," he said. "Not now, not ever." Ethan nodded, his fingers grazing the letter tucked in his pocket. The jacket hugged him, warm against the icy breeze, and I saw it in his eyes, this was more than cloth. This was a promise kept. As we crossed the frozen grass, kids peered out from classroom windows. Whispers rippled through, soft at first, then louder. Some looked away, but others stared, wide-eyed, seeing Ethan anew, not the weird kid in the old jacket, but a boy carrying something huge. A legacy. A name. A courage that roared in silence. By the front steps, the buzz of voices trailed us. Ethan paused, glancing back at the school that tried to break him. He didn't speak, why would he? His silence wasn't a wall anymore, it was a thunderclap, proclaiming who he was and always would be. Robert stood tall beside him, metals gleaming in the weak light. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. Then Ethan breathed deep and stepped forward, boots crunching on frost. The jacket moved with him, every step a whisper of the man who wore it first. And I realized, this is how we honor the past. Not with fanfare, but with quiet rebellion, refusing to bow even when the load feels crushing. By lunchtime, the story had spread like wildfire. Whispers grew into tales, tales into legends. In the cafeteria, I caught the chatter, "Did you hear? Colonel Miller came for Ethan. His dad was a real hero. He didn't even sign that paper." I saw it in their eyes, the shift. They glanced at Ethan's empty seat, then at the jacket draped over his chair when he returned. No one sneered that afternoon. No one jeered. Some flashed shy smiles, tentative, but real. Others hung their heads, ashamed of what they'd thought before. In the library, I watched a girl trace Matthew Wells in a yearbook, her touch soft, almost holy. In the hall, a boy straightened his cap, standing a bit taller. Small things, but oh, how they mattered. At day's end, Ethan walked out, head high, the jacket fitting him like it was stitched for him alone, the cuffs too long, but who cared? Robert and I trailed behind, our breaths clouding in the chill. He looked at me, eyes warm. "Thank you," he said quietly. I shook my head. "It wasn't me," I replied. "It was him, always him." We stopped at the flagpole, the flag whipping in the wind. Ethan gazed up, calm and steady, the fading sun catching his father's name on the jacket. And in that glow, I saw it clear as day, honor isn't in medals. It's in the quiet gaps between words, in how we stand. In refusing to let the world define us. As Ethan walked away, I exhaled, my chest tight with pride. He moved down those steps, the jacket swaying with him, every thread a story, every patch a proof. And in that steady stride, I knew it, some heroes don't need medals or spotlights, just a reason to rise when the world wants them down. Ethan Wells was that hero. And in his silence, I heard the loudest truth: dignity isn't handed out, it's forged in every breath, every quiet stand. It's woven into an old jacket and beats in the heart of a boy who knows who he is, even if the world's slow to see it. Ethan's story cuts deep, it's a gut punch of truth about how shallow and vicious people can be. That jacket isn't just some hand-me-down, it's his father's sacrifice stitched into every thread, a badge of honor most will never grasp. Seeing him mocked for it, it infuriates me. I've watched friends shrink under that same cruelty, and it's soul-crushing. Bullying doesn't just bruise, it scars. But Ethan? He's a quiet warrior, standing firm when everything screams to give in. That's raw strength, the kind we should all chase. His silence roars louder than any comeback, proving respect isn't loud or flashy, it's in the unspoken, the sacrifices we carry. We're failing if we let superficial garbage drown out empathy. Legacy matters. Heroes like Ethan's dad, and Ethan, deserve better than our blindness. We need to wake up and honor what's real. In our darkest hours, kindness still shines through, often in the softest corners. Not every helper craves a cheer, some just want to know someone's fed today. And sometimes, that's enough to shift a life. You might forget this tale, but if no one shares it, history fades to nothing. Subscribe to Heartfelt Gratitude Stories, where justice gets its due, kindness lingers, and no quiet hero is ever forgotten.